Hello everyone, this is Damon with Pixnub, and for this video I'm going to be going over how to create this neon effect using a neon layer style that you can get on the Platinum section of the Pixnub website. This is a free download for Platinum members, so make sure to go and download this if you are a member. And the download comes with 2 PSD files, and each file has got, let's see, there's 16 different colors. And those come in solid and hollow. And so the solid is for a more narrow font, and the hollow is for when you're using a thicker font that you want to make hollow in the middle. And also, this doesn't have to be just for text. You can use this to create a neon glow effect from any shape. And in this example, you can see these are solid shapes, and then the layer style applied hollowed those out. But for this tutorial, we're actually going to be working on the text because that's most often what you'll probably be working with. And so to start, you'll just go to the layer you want, and the easiest way to select a layer is if you have the Move tool selected and this Auto Select checkbox on. Then wherever you click in the document, it's going to select the layer. So just click on the one you want, and then go into the layer palette, and then right click on the FX, and then select Copy Layer Style. And then you'll go to the text layer you want, and then right click and Paste Layer Style. Oh, and by the way too, before I do that, it doesn't matter what color you make the text. I just used 50% gray in this example, but it does not matter. The layer style, when you do the paste layer style, and again, that's right click and then select paste layer style, but that is going to override the color. Now, the next thing you'll need to do is scale the effect. And the reason why we need to do that is because often the text is going to be a different size in the new document you're pasting it into. So in this case it looks okay, but I do think it's scaled up a little bit too large. So I'll right click and hit Scale Effects. You see as we turn this down, the effect is being scaled down for all of the effects in the layer style. So if we zoom in and look at it a little bit closer, it's not only the glow, but it's also this stroke on the edge. And if we go too high, we see that we completely lose the effect. It fades out. Now, what I don't like about this slider here is it goes 0 to 1,000 or 1 to 1,000, but 1 to 100 is only a few pixels you have to work with when you're using the mouse. So it's often easier just to type in what you want. And I think around 65% for this actually looks pretty good. So I'm just going to select OK. And then you could go into the individual, if you double click on the layer style here, you could go into the individual settings and you can adjust the percentage or the size as needed. And there's actually 2 glow settings on this. There's a drop shadow, which if I turn the outer glow off and select the drop shadow, you see we have a very faint glow effect. I'm actually using this drop shadow in this, not as a shadow, but actually as an additional glow. But I'm just going to cancel this. I'm just going to use this as is, as it came in. I'm going to show you how now to give it that effect where the wall's being lit up around the font. So to do this, I'm not going to do this in the layer style itself because there's really nothing in the layer style that you can do to give this true effect of where we're going to illuminate the wall here. So to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a new solid color. I'm trying to think of the best way. There's several ways to do this. I'm just trying to think of the best steps for this tutorial, and I think making a solid color layer first will work best. So I'm going to go with a hue of 193, a saturation of 100, and a brightness of 100. And so use the same hue that was from the document. I can't click on it now because I've got this window open, but use the same hue that's in the layer style and that's listed in the document. So I've got 193, and you can see in the document the hue is listed in the layer style. That makes it easier for you to know what color to use. Now I'm going to set this to soft light blending mode. And there's two ways to do this. You can actually do this with soft light or with screen, and with screen turn the opacity down. But I'm going to go soft light on this. The next thing I'm going to do is just throw this. Actually, no, I don't want to throw it away. I'm going to Control Z to undo that. I'm actually just going to invert this. So select the layer mask and hit Control I or Command I on Mac. So with this mask black, now that this layer is having no effect because the effect is masked out. So now I'm just going to grab a brush. I'm just going to use a brush at 100% hardness. I'm just going to brush around the text. You don't have to be perfect here. Actually, I think I'm going to go a little bit wider to give this more of a broad effect. You don't have to be perfect because we're actually going to blur this. So we're on the mask, and I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, and then Gaussian Blur. And then you can see the effect being blurred in on the wall there. I'm just going to go up until I think it looks fairly natural. Okay, so somewhere in there. The next thing I'm going to want to do, I think I want to do this underneath this layer. That's why I was trying to, before I did that, I was trying to think of the best steps to go through. I guess it really doesn't matter which order you do it, but it does matter which order you put the layer. So I'm going to create a curves layer, but before I do that, I'm going to Control click or Command click on Mac on this mask, and that's going to create a selection of your mask there. And then I'm going to go and add an adjustment layer, and I'm going to add a curves. Now you could use a brightness contrast layer, but for me I like to use curves because there's a little more control over that. I'm not going to get into actually how curves work in this tutorial. This is not an in-depth Photoshop tutorial on how the adjustment layers themselves work, but if you don't understand curves, just use a brightness layer and increase the brightness. So basically what I've done is I've increased the brightness around the font in this area. So now you see with just the brightness turned on, you see that it brightens the brick wall, but it's too red. And then with this color layer turned on, and again, we're in soft light blending mode. And as mentioned, you could do a screen blending mode, but then turn it down. Although screen can make it look a little more washed out. And that's why I like to use, in this case, soft light. It really depends on the background you're going with too. Last thing, I think I'm going to add this underneath. I'm going to desaturate just because I think this brick wall's looking a little bit too red. So I don't know, somewhere like that, and it kind of gives the impression that we're shooting a photo at night up against a neon sign, and it's kind of made the wall illuminate blue from this neon sign. So really not too hard. The stuff I covered with the layer styles is moderately advanced, I guess, but it's an optional steps to add these anyway. So let's go back. I'm going to turn these off. And let's go, as mentioned, I'm going to discuss two others here for the types. I'm going to go to this large solid neon font. Or it's not even a neon font, it's just I don't even know, some kind of script font here. But if we go to the solid is not what we want. I'm going to show you why here. Let's use red just for this example for the heck of it. Let's copy layer style. And you can see here that I mean, it may be the effect you're going for, but usually with a thicker font, it's not what you're going to want. I'm just making this too thick to be like a neon sign. So in that case, we've got these hollow layers. So I'm just going to right click, same thing, copy layer style. I'm going to undo this first. You don't have to, but just to show you that. Just starting from a plain gray layer, when I paste that layer style. When I undid, I must have lost the copy. So let's go back to the hollow again. Okay, now same thing here. We're going to want to scale this because again, it came in a bit too large. So right click and then scale effects. And maybe around 60%, I guess. That looks pretty good. And then again, you could go through that same procedure before and brighten up the back of the wall behind it and give it some color. I'm not going to repeat that same lesson that I just showed you, but it would be the same steps as you did before. Now the last one to talk about is if you have a font that's already hollow, because some fonts that you download will be hollowed out just for giving that same, I think this was actually called something neon. Yeah, Neon Glow. So this font here is Neon Glow, and this one's already got the font hollowed out. So in that case, you're going to want to use a solid. If you use the hollow one, let's grab another color just to do it here. Let's grab the green just for the heck of it. Let's copy layer style. It's too large again to see the effect, so let's scale this back. Okay, so you see what happened. We copied the hollow layer style. That's actually making, scale this down a little bit more so we can see it a little bit better. But it's actually making the inner part of each of those parts hollow. So you've got hollow font within hollow font. That may be the effect you're going for, but typically not though. Usually for this type of font, usually this is the effect you're going to go for. Since the font is already hollow, we're using the solid. And again, this came in a little bit too large on the scale. And that, on the scale, that completely depends on the size of the image you're pasting into versus the size of the layer style you're copying from. So there's no way around getting to have to do that step. Although if they're sized the same one document to the next, then it's going to come in the same, but otherwise you'll have to scale it. And one last thing about scaling too, let me undo this so we start with the original here. So this is how it originally came in. You have to be careful that you see, how do I explain this? I think I'm going to go into the layer style itself to explain this. Let's see here. So on the outer glow, 75 pixels is what we're set to, and the drop shadow is set to 150. Now the max for any of these is 250. So what can happen is if you try to scale too much, you're going to hit that 250 max, and it's going to clamp that effect. And then if you try to scale it back, I'll just demonstrate here. I hope this makes sense when I do. Let's just go from 100 up to 1,000%. And now that if we look in here, we're clamped at 250 on both the drop shadow and the outer glow. So now if I scale this back to 10%, in theory this should go into 1,000% and then the 10 should be back to where we started. But in reality, that's not what happens. So if we go 2 steps back, You see this is what it was like before I scaled to 1,000 and then down to 10. What happened was we hit that 250 max, and then when we went back down, now it's at 25 on both the drop shadow and the outer glow. Whereas if you remember, the outer glow before was 75 and the drop shadow was 150. And that happened because we clamped it on that last time we scaled it, and then when we scaled it back, they lost their proportions on the effects of the layer. So for that reason, when you're going to scale, just make sure you scale one time. That's my recommendation for any layer styles, not just with Pixnub layer styles, but just scale the effects once and make sure you get the look you want, and then don't mess with the scaling. If you need to mess with it again, it's best to repaste the layer style and then rescale it, so you're only scaling it one time. Anyway, somewhere like in there looks pretty good. And again, you would go through if you wanted to, and it depends on your image, because you may not need to brighten a brick wall behind it because you may be putting this neon sign just floating in the air for whatever reason. But for the case of something like this, where it's against a brick wall, that effect, I've already got one saved here. Like with the palm tree, for example, that glowing effect, it really just adds to making it look that much more natural. Anyway, thanks for watching, and if you're interested in these neon layer styles, please be sure to visit our website. That's pixnub.com. And as mentioned, these layer styles are free for Platinum Club members, so make sure to check that out as well.